Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for coming. My name is Libby Adler. I'm on the faculty here at Northeastern, coming at you live from sabbatical, actually. I am delighted to be here today to moderate and be a part of this panel of lawyers who are dedicated to something I care a lot about, which is the well-being of foster children and their families. A couple of thank yous. As always, we thank the Daynards, Dick and Carol, for their ongoing support of this series and helping us. Everything okay? Okay. And, oh, got it. Sorry. I'm just going to change the speaker view if I can make the this thing work. Sorry. Thanking Dick and Carol for their ongoing support of this series. I also want to thank SIPIAC, the Northeastern Center for Public Interest, Advocacy, and Collaboration, and in particular Lucy Williams, Shannon Alwakil, who is right now fixing the computer situation, and Abby Waddleton, who all kind of made this work, and of course Brad Whitmarsh, who is also helping us make this work. So let me introduce this incredible panel we have here. I guess many of you had the opportunity already to meet our Daynard Distinguished Visiting Fellow, Emma Ketteringham. She's one of us, a graduate of Northeastern Law School. After clerking, she started at the Bronx Defenders as a criminal defense attorney, is now managing attorney of the family defense practice. Emma supervises attorneys, social workers, parent advocates who represent parents accused of child abuse and neglect and facing possible termination of parental rights. She participates in numerous court-based and independent coalitions to develop pro-family policies and practices in New York City, including the committee devoted to reducing racial disproportionality in foster care. So welcome, Emma, and thank you for being our Daynard Fellow this year. We also have three fantastic panelists joining Emma. Zabrina Aleguire is the co-founder and co-executive director of East Bay Family Defenders, a new family defense agency in the San Francisco Bay Area. Zabrina got her start in family defense at the Doors Legal Services in New York City and at Brooklyn's Family Defense Practice, where she practiced in an interdisciplinary model alongside parent advocates and social workers. Upon relocating to California, Zabrina represented children at Legal Services for Children in San Francisco and taught juvenile law at University of San Francisco School of Law. She's co-authored articles on rights of young people and reform efforts for children impacted by parental arrest and incarceration. Tehra Coles is a litigation supervisor at the Center for Family Representation, or CFR. For the past 9 years, she's represented respondents in termination of parental rights proceedings and other child welfare matters. She currently supervises CFR's government affairs and policy work. In that role, she works with colleagues from across the state to improve the family court system by testifying at the state and local levels and interacting with elected officials to support legislative change. And finally, Lisa Sangoi is a co-founder and co-director of the Movement for Family Power, an organization that works to end the foster system's policing and punishment of families and to create a world where the dignity and integrity of all families is valued and supported. So thank you all for joining us and being here today. And I'm just going to start by asking you to extend our introduction a little bit and to say a little bit about what you do, how you came to do this work, what your role is in your specific work environment. I can call on you, or you can hop in and get your own initiative. Emma, why don't you start?
I was gonna not start because I feel like I've taken up a lot of space on this campus the last couple of days, but I'm happy to get us started. I've had the opportunity, first of all, I just want to say thank you again for having me. These are such unusual times. I mean, just the fact that I'm speaking at Northeastern from my bedroom feels really weird, but you know, these are such unusual times, and it has been so grounding and so inspiring to talk to you students this week. What an incredible place this school is, and what just the grace and grit that you're greeting this crisis and starting law school, many of you, I'm so impressed and so overwhelmed. And so I have to say that. And your questions have been amazing, and I've just loved meeting all of you. And so anyway, so how did I get into this work? I started really in the criminal legal system as a public defender, where I represented people accused of crimes. And as I, you know, explained a little bit in my talk this week, I started to just talk to my clients and learn from them about this whole other system that was impacting their lives and doing them and their families great harm. And, you know, the criminal case might end, you know, and I'd say, okay, you know, thanks. I hope, you know, I think we resolved this well, no criminal record, no time, and see you later. And they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, my kids are still in the system, and I don't know who's, you know, going to help me with that case. And at the time in New York City, parents were represented mostly by solo practitioners, which really meant that it was a very overworked group of lawyers who didn't work with social workers, you know, who didn't work for organizations. And so parents were really struggling. And as a result, their children were just languishing in care because parents really didn't know what to do to get them out. And so it was really just like one client at a time. I started to go to the building next door and learned about this whole other system. And I think like probably a good way to think about family defense, especially for those of you who aren't familiar at all with the field of law, is to think of it as sort of a really close cousin to the practice of criminal defense law. You have clients, you have the state coming to take something that is very precious to them. In criminal legal proceedings, it's their liberty. Well, in these cases, it's their children. And your job as their lawyer is to stand up next to them and protect them from the state that is coming for something so dear. And so that's really how I got started. And it's sort of like Pandora's box. Like, once I saw what was happening in that system, and I hope we'll talk a little bit more about that today, what it looked like back then compared to what it looks like today. There's some scary things that haven't changed and some good things that have changed. But that was really my motivation. I wanted to be where I felt my clients most needed me and where it was most challenging, and that was family court.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for getting on another Zoom today. I know folks are feeling kind of zoomed out, and so we really appreciate folks' time and attention, and a big thank you to Northeastern University for making space for this conversation. I can't really say that there is enough space made for these conversations in the university context, and so I feel very grateful for that. So my name is Lisa. As Libby said, I'm with an organization called Movement for Family Power. We support organizing and movement building to try to limit the harmful reach of the child welfare system. And so in terms of what brings me to this work, I think, there's so many of us sort of fighting for some version of liberation or another. And I think in that work, it is really, really important to make sure no one gets left behind. And it has felt like for some time that parents accused of abusing and neglecting their children, and in particular mamas accused of abusing and neglecting their children, were getting left out in the sort of larger conversation for social justice. And so I think for many of us who do this work, we do this work because of the commitment to no one, getting left behind. I think, so the organization I'm with, it's just two people, and we're both trained as lawyers, and we've both worked at lawyers, and we have both sort of transitioned to doing work where we attempt to use our legal skills to support movement building and organizing in this model of lawyering that's sort of loosely known as movement lawyering. And I'm really excited to talk to you more about that as the panel goes on.
Great. Tehra?
Hi, everyone. I want to echo what Emma and Lisa both said about appreciating this opportunity to be here and talk about this work. As far as how I came to work in this area, I actually, I remember studying for the bar exam in my law school library, thinking I just have to get through this and then I'm going to go work at the public defender's office representing people accused of committing crimes. And I got a call saying that the funding for that position had been lost. And so I panicked, and then I ended up going to work actually at the New York State Defenders Association, doing some policy and working to improve the public defense system in New York State. Then I got another call that they had another position, but that position was in family court, and I knew nothing about family court. Didn't honestly want to know that much about family court, to tell you the truth, but I knew that it was important that if I really wanted to make any sort of change, then I needed to be an advocate and really on the ground and see what was happening in the courtroom. So I took that opportunity, and I learned quickly that the criminal justice system is not the only system that is disproportionately impacting people who look like me and my family and other Black and brown people. And I was really shocked that there was a system that could so carelessly take children. And we all learn in school that hopefully we should be learning in school that this country has a really sordid history of taking Black and brown children as a means of controlling Black and brown people and punishing them. And the family court system, something that we'll talk about later, what it's been able to do, we call it the child welfare system. I think a lot of us here are working on changing our language to call it what it really is. System that regulates families, controls how they interact, where they can live, how much time they can spend with their children, and we'll get into more of that later. But that really is what on this path and turned my planned journey of practicing family court, family law into something that I really have tried to make into a career that doesn't just focus on helping families in the courtroom, which is very important, but also works to affect real change. We need to abolish the system that we have right now, but as we are working towards that, I think there's a lot of legislative reforms and changes that we can make to really change what is happening to families in every family court across the country.
And Zabrina.
Hi, hello everybody. Good morning from California time. I'm really honored to be with these three phenomenal women, and appreciate that Emma, who has been a real mentor to me in this field, thought to include me and our organization in this really important, I think, moment for us to be able to share with you all our passion for this work, and to raise just awareness so that we can be on the path to really, really having a flourishing family defense movement that really, again, addresses the family regulation system that is known in other, I think, more kind of deceptive ways as the child welfare system. And there's so much that we'd like to bring forward today in terms of lifting the veil and revealing what's really the truth of what happens in this system. The reason that I came into this work is because I gradually began to discover what was really happening in this system. And from my background, I didn't have firsthand exposure. I actually grew up with two parents who were CPS social workers, and while they were very critical of a lot of the system, I think there was a way that, you know, they were trying to do their best. And, but I remember hearing stories that to me sounded really traumatic for the families who would be separated when my dad would go out to be involved, or my stepmother would talk about how there weren't enough resources to actually prevent the kids from being removed from their parents, or why were all the resources going to foster homes versus actually to preserve families and do family preservation, which was a term she would talk about. So in law school, all of my interest in doing anti-racism work and work that was advocating for gender rights really culminated into me realizing that that this field was the one that brought all of my intersectional interests together. And I also realized that this was a really undeveloped field where we really needed to have people carving out paths and creating advocacy. So I had the benefit of actually having a fellowship out of law school to advocate for teen parents who themselves were foster children. And I did that at the Doors Legal Services Center, which is like a wraparound free youth center in New York City, where young people were able to get free dinner at night. They were, at the time, they could get childcare there. They could get counseling, they could get medical services, they could also get free legal services, which is where I got to be with mostly immigration attorneys. And and now they even have transitional housing. And what I saw was, my project was because there were, at the time in New York City, there was a greatly disproportionate removal rate of infants from young parents who themselves were in foster care, often because there weren't foster homes that would accommodate a teen parent having their infant with them. And also because every single fault, every single vulnerability, every single weakness that the young person had was cataloged in detail about them in case files that were put before everyone in the system, including the court, including whether or not the young person had been having premarital sex, and whether or not they were on birth control, and what the conversation had been about their abortion counseling. And so I walked into a situation where I was able to bring dedicated advocacy to these young people who really were being set up for failure. And we had 100% ultimate success rate of reunifying every single young parent with their child. For one young father, it took a couple years on appeal, but now he's a father who's not that young anymore, and now he became an advocate for other young fathers around New York City in the end. And so what I saw was that really, if we did dedicate resources to really lifting up and supporting young people living, and not just young parents, but all parents living in poverty, that we could really divert people from this system. And it debunked this myth that is so popular in our country, that it's bad parents whose children are taken away from them by this family regulation system known as CPS, or the child welfare system. And what those of us who practice in the system learn is that it's actually the minority of cases. Oh, I'm in a room where the light turns off. That'll happen. But we're in a system that it's actually the minority of cases that involve physical abuse or sexual abuse. So depending on the jurisdiction, it could be 5% of cases. In our jurisdiction, it's about 15% of cases. And the vast majority of cases are neglect allegations against parents. So that's in our it's 85% where we are. And those neglect allegations are really amorphous and really get to poverty-based challenges for families. So lack of childcare, lack of mental health resources, lack of sufficient medical interventions if children have fragile medical issues, challenges around substance use and what kind of support people get, and also the trauma of living in poverty, and the trauma also of living in our racist country. And racial trauma is a term that I've appreciated that has been entering our vernacular. And I think it's really important that we also look at that, as well as toxic stress. And ACEs is getting a lot of adverse childhood experiences. Research is getting a lot of understanding now these days too. So there's so many things that actually make up what could lead to quote unquote neglect. And what we see in our system is that a whole kitchen sink of things, everything is considered relevant to bring up in terms of what a parent has or has not done and what circumstances have happened. And parents are, in our experience, the ones who are really, blamed for a lot of what really are systemic injustices. And I don't see enough discernment of that. And that's, again, part of the role of really good lawyering, is discerning what are the actual standards here. What's, you know, where is a parent actually culpable, and where do we really need to look at this as more of a systemic issue, and add to the understanding of how this system is rife with systemic racism and injustice, just as the criminal legal system and other systems that we're examining these days.
Thank you. So you've all, even in your initial comments, really touched on a number of the things that I intended to ask you about, but I'm going to try to zero in on them nonetheless. Please, I mean, I'm happy to call on you if you wish, but, you know, go ahead and jump in if you have comments. So you already started to speak, all of you, I think, in your opening remarks about who exactly is most likely to be impacted by the foster care system. Tell me a little bit about who are these folks? Why do you think it's the folks that you see? What kinds of cases come up for them? And then relatedly, each of you, I think, has mentioned the racism that characterizes the system. Exactly, is the system inherently racist? Are there features that could be changed that would make it less racist? What's the nature of the racism in this system, and where can you step in to address the population specifically that's being most harmed by the mistakes of the system?
It's hard for us not to be in the same room, because usually we sort of feed off each other's energy of who's gonna speak. But so, I mean, I've been here a lot. So like Tehra, Zabrina, Lisa, do any of you want to like just start us off? I mean, with this, I'm happy to, but.
I can just say, and maybe like the last part of what you said about, is the system inherently racist? Are there pieces that can maybe be salvaged? From my perspective, no. I think that when you rely on a system that in part relies on the discretion of other people, right? So like a way that a lot of people become involved in the system is because someone called a mandated reporter reports them to the system. Mandated reporters are people like doctors, nurses, you know, people that, you know, you come into contact a lot, but also include people who work at shelters, right? So people who work at a lot of, you know, welfare offices, public assistance offices, places that people who are poor, people who are Black and brown are more likely to come in contact with. And those people who are choosing to make the reports have their own biases that everyone deals with. But the racism that may lead them to make a decision to report someone as opposed to something else, that's not something that the system can really filter out, right? That's just a part of it, because the system relies on those people reporting other parents to the system. And once you're in, then you're subject to all of the things that the system is able to do to impact your family and to destroy your family in many instances. So I think that you can't take one piece and save the rest. I think, in my opinion, you really have to start fresh if you're talking about how you're going to address some of the more severe cases, like Zabrina was mentioning, the very small portion of the cases that this system currently deals with, like sex abuse and physical abuse. Most of these cases are poverty related, right? They're things that really, if you step back and think about it, could just be solved by money. So, you know, if we're gonna have, if this system is that we're gonna spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because someone is home insecure, and we're those thousands of dollars not to that person to help them get stable housing, we're going to give it to someone else who already has stable housing, but we're going to give them this money to care for this child and just let this person figure it out. You can't save that system, in my opinion.
I'll just add, building off of what Tehra was saying, in term adding to who's in the system. I think it's very important to understand that the overwhelming, and you know, we've sort of reiterated this many times, the overwhelming majority of folks in the system are very low income. Black, Latinx, Indigenous folks are very overrepresented in the system. In many states, it's not just legal, but it is the law that if a parent has a disability and gives birth, that the system will come in and take the child forever. Low-income moms who experience intimate partner violence lose their children because of the violence perpetrated against them at extraordinarily high rates. People who use controlled substances who are also low income and people of color routinely have their parenting scrutinized and surveilled in a way that white and wealthier parents don't. This system is hyper-focused on marginal folks living on the margins, marginalized people, and hyper-focused on taking conditions of living in marginalization, right? Like taking conditions that are the result of living in a society that has no commitment to supporting low-income people, that has no commitment to redressing generations and generations of racism, right? We live in a society that sort of refuses to address those things, and as a result, 1 in 3 Black children lives in poverty right now. So what the system does is it takes these societal failings, right? These massive societal failings, and it turns them into parental culpability and parental fault. So it will target a mother who is living in a car with her baby and who is using methamphetamines to stay up overnight because it's not safe to live in your car. It'll target that mother and say, not that you are an amazing person surviving in conditions that should really never exist and that no one should ever, ever have to try to survive in. It won't look at the mother and say, well, damn, you know, this country has withheld wealth and jobs and housing security and all these things for generations and generations, so we're going to try to do right and provide housing with no strings attached. That's not what the system does. The system looks at that mother and says, you are a bad parent. You're the fact that you don't have housing is your fault because you couldn't pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? And the system helps perpetuate that narrative that those of us that have housing and have educations and, you know, that we earned them and we are good people because we earn these things. And then people that don't have these things are, you know, to use terms that I've heard the system use, you know, have defects in their personalities and in their parenting.
You mentioned, I welcome more comments on the same topic, but I just wanted to pick out from your comment. You mentioned surveillance, and I'm just interested exactly how does that work? Make that vivid for us. Where is the surveillance happening? How does it go? What happens when a call comes in? The way that Tehra says, you know, a call comes in from a mandated reporter or whoever it is. Where's the surveillance?
Well, first of all, I just want to like really show my support for everything Tehra and Lisa just said. I mean, I see the system the exact same way. I think it's actually the system itself that is in the way of preventing family separation and truly supporting families. Like the system itself, the way it operates, does that harm. So fixing something that was designed to do that feels impossible. I think we have to just reimagine an entirely different response to families who are struggling because of centuries of economic inequity and racism. But just to orient people about like how does one get a case in this system? So all states have laws that are called mandated reporter laws. And every year I feel like we hear about a new category of people that's being thrown on the list and called a mandated reporter. And those are folks who are mandated to report child neglect and abuse. They are supposed to call a child abuse hotline anytime they believe or suspect that a child is being mistreated. Now, it's not just calling and saying that you think, you know, a child is being mistreated in the sense of physical or sexual abuse, right? It's sort of, you get thousands of calls to hotlines that are about children showing up in school hungry, or the child, I know it was a baby, but like, you know, the baby of the mom and living in the car. Like a person might walk by that, maybe a police officer walks by that, and as a mandated reporter, the place they have to go is the child abuse hotline. Like that is the system has been set up so that that is where we report children who are living in difficult situations, not just children who have been, you know, subjected to physical or sexual abuse. So the kinds of folks who are on that list is not hard to imagine, right? It's social workers, it's teachers, it's nurses, it's doctors, but it's also, you know, it's shelter workers. It's the folks who are where you go to get your Medicaid benefits. It's I think Tehra sort of alluded to this. It's you know, the business of being poor means that you come into a lot of contact with city and social welfare officials who are mandated to report you if they suspect that your children are at risk of being neglected. And so a lot of the cases come in that way. Cases also come in when you've been arrested, or I think, as Lisa suggested, or if you've reported a crime, right? If you're a mom and you've gone somewhere for some help because you're subjected to abuse, a lot of times, you know, the way the system will treat you is not with compassion and support, but with taking your children. So those are a lot of the ways that our clients come to the attention of this system, because it is the sort of city officials and social welfare folks that we have in positions of power over poor people are also the ones that our law requires to report them. In New York, and I'm not sure if this is true in every state, but in New York, you don't have to be a mandated reporter to call an abuse. So you can call on your neighbor, you can call on your, you know, mother-in-law, like, and so basically you have anyone and everyone can make a report. Those reports go to something called the State Central Registry in New York State. Every state has a hotline set up to receive those calls. And if those calls are accepted by the hotline, you know, then they are transferred to the local Child Protective Service agency in your county or your city, who must go out and investigate. So in New York City, that would be ACS. In Massachusetts, I think it's DCF. They're called different things depending on the state. They go out and they conduct their investigation. And I don't want to speak too much longer and take up more space, but like what that investigation looks like